Commander Veltar's heavy footsteps echoed through the metallic corridors of station. Omega Sivan, as he approached the main assembly hall, his battle-worn armor bore the scars of countless conflicts, plasma burns from the Centauri Wars, claw marks from the Beast campaigns, and the distinctive purple staining that only came from surviving a Zephyrian gas attack. Today, those scars felt heavier than usual. The massive doors to the Galactic War Council chamber hissed open, revealing an amphitheater filled with representatives from across known space. The air thrummed with tension and the low hum of universal translators working overtime to bridge the communication gap between species. In the front rows sat the towering Vorthok generals, their crystalline skin refracting the chamber's blue lighting into rainbow patterns. Behind them, the insectoid klaxons clicked their mandibles in rapid conversation, their compound eyes never missing a detail. The serpentine Naga delegation coiled in their specialized seating, while the gaseous ethereals maintained their containment. Suits with mechanical precision, Commander Veltar had fought alongside, against most of these species over his 30-year military career. He knew their tactics, their strengths, their weaknesses. But what he was about to share would challenge everything they thought they knew about warfare. Attention, honored delegates. Veltar's voice boomed across the chamber as he activated the central podium. The room fell silent, save for the gentle whir of life support systems and the occasional translation glitch that sparked. Brief static. The scarred Krillian warrior surveyed the assembled faces, or what passed for faces, among the diverse gathering. Some species communicated through color changes, others through pheromone releases, but all had their attention fixed on him with the intensity that only came from recognizing a fellow warrior's experience. "You know me as a soldier, Veltar?" began his voice, carrying the weight of decades spent in the void between stars. "I have stood on the bridge of burning starships. I have walked through the ruins of conquered worlds. I have seen empires rise and fall like waves against the shore of eternity." I paused, letting his words sink in. The chamber's advanced acoustics carried every nuance of his tone to the farthest seats. "Hey, I have fought in 47 major campaigns across the Outer Rim territories. From the ice moons of Kalos Prime to the lava fields of Pyria 7, I have witnessed the tactical genius of the Zephyrian swarm tactics, marveled at the Vorthok crystal formations that could shatter enemy morale with their beauty alone, and learned to respect the klaxon hive mind coordination that makes them nearly unbeatable in defensive positions." Several delegates shifted in their seats, wondering where this was leading. Veltar was known for his tactical briefings, but this felt different, more personal. But today he continued, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that indicated deep emotional disturbance among his species. "I speak not of victory, but of fear." A ripple of confusion passed through the audience like a wave. The translation systems worked overtime as gasps, chirps, and color flashes indicated surprise across the diverse gathering. Commander Veltar was legendary throughout the galaxy, a warrior who had single-handedly held the line at the Battle of Kepler Station, who had led the desperate evacuation of Sanctuary World when the star went supernova, who had never retreated from any engagement in 3 decades of warfare. Fear was not a word associated with Veltar. The Vorthok General Crystal leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting concern. "Commander, what could possibly—" Veltar raised a clawed hand for silence. "Humans," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, yet carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "The humans are not what we believed them to be." Behind him, the massive holographic display activated with a soft hum. The 3-dimensional image that appeared showed a small world suspended in the darkness of space, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns that spoke of a living, breathing planet. "Earth," Veltar announced. "Home to the species most of us have dismissed as primitive upstarts. A young race that has barely mastered faster-than-light travel, a people we assumed would be easy to understand, easy to predict, easy to manage." The hologram rotated slowly, showing the planet from different angles. To most of the assembled delegates, it looked unremarkable, another garden world among thousands scattered across the galaxy. No unique features, No obvious strategic value. No resources that couldn't be found elsewhere. 3 cycles ago, I was assigned as military observer to a conflict in the outer colonies. A simple territorial dispute. Pirates had attacked a human mining settlement. Standard procedure called for orbital bombardment followed by ground forces to secure the area. Clean, efficient, minimal casualties among the attacking force. Veltar's scarred face grew grim as he continued. The human colony world was called Haven's Rest. The defenders were led by a man named Taman, a simple mining foreman with no formal military training. His second in command was a woman called Hai-Jin, who taught their children in a small schoolhouse made of prefabricated metal panels. The holographic image shifted to show a barren mining world, industrial structures, excavation equipment, simple housing blocks designed for function rather than beauty. Nothing about it suggested military significance. What I witnessed there, ... Beltar paused, his mandibles clicking in the nervous rhythm that had become his unconscious tell whenever he relived those memories. What I saw there defied every principle of military logic I had learned in 30 years of warfare. Assembled. Officers leaned forward in their seats, chairs, pods, and containment units. Whatever had shaken the legendary Krillian warrior to his core, whatever had put the taste of fear in the mouth of a veteran who had seen the worst the galaxy could offer, he needed to understand it. Because if Commander Veltar was afraid of the humans, then perhaps they all should be. The holographic display flickered and transformed, showing Haven's Rest in all its harsh beauty. The mining world hung in space like a brown jewel, its surface scarred by decades of industrial excavation. Massive strip mines carved geometric patterns across continents, while processing plants belched steam into the thin atmosphere. Haven's Rest, Veltar continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone reliving a nightmare. Population 3. 112 human souls. Men like Dongwu, who operated the heavy mining equipment. Women like Soyoung, who managed the water recycling systems. Children who played between the machinery, turning industrial pipes into jungle gyms. The hologram zoomed in, showing the settlement in detail. Modular housing units clustered around a central plaza, where a small school sat next to a medical clinic no bigger than a storage shed. Everything was functional, built for survival rather than comfort. The Zephyrian raiding fleet appeared without warning, Veltar said, gesturing to the display. 47 ships materialized from hyperspace. Assault cruisers, troop transports, fighter squadrons. 5,000 of the galaxy's most feared raiders. Armed with military-grade plasma weapons and backed by orbital bombardment platforms, Commander. Vexara of the Zephyrian delegation shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her scaled features darkening with what might have been shame. The other delegates turned to look at her, remembering the Zephyrian reputation for quick, brutal raids that left no survivors. I was aboard the observation vessel's Silent Watch, Veltar continued. Standard protocol for monitoring human colonial conflicts. We expected to document a typical raid, demand for surrender, brief resistance, inevitable capture, or elimination of the colonists. The hologram showed the Zephyrian fleet taking position above the planet, their ships casting shadows. Across the mining facility, like metallic vultures circling prey, the human leader Taman was a man of 43 standard years. His hands were permanently stained black from working with mining equipment. His back was bent from decades spent in the deep shafts. When the surrender demand came through the communications array, he listened carefully to the translator. Veltar paused, his scarred features reflecting the light from the holographic display. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. A ripple of confusion passed through the assembled delegates. Laughter in the face of overwhelming odds was not typical behavior for any known species. Taman gathered the colonists in the central plaza. 300 humans, miners, engineers, teachers, children, elderly. He stood on a makeshift platform built from mining equipment and spoke words that I will never forget. They want us to surrender. They think we're just going to roll over and die. Well, I've got news for them. This is our home. We built it with our own hands. We're not giving it up without a fight. The hologram shifted to show the colony's response. Instead of panic or preparation for surrender, the humans began moving with purpose that seemed almost choreographed. The teacher took charge of the children. But she didn't hide them in shelters. She organized them into communication runners, using their small size to move through maintenance tunnels that connected every building. Young Ho, the chief engineer, began converting industrial equipment into weapons with modifications that violated every safety protocol ever written. Veltar's mandibles clicked as he recalled the details. Within 6 hours, the mining settlement had transformed into something else entirely. Mining lasers designed to cut through solid rock were repositioned to sweep the landing zones. Chemical processing plants began producing toxic gas clouds that could blind and disorient even Zephyrian battle armor. The display showed the incredible transformation. Heavy excavation equipment was repositioned to create defensive barriers. Conveyor belt systems were modified to carry improvised explosives. Even the children's playground equipment was converted into observation posts and communication relay points. When the first Zephyrian dropships landed, they expected to find terrified civilians hiding in their homes, Veltar said, his voice growing more intense. Instead, they found themselves in a maze of industrial death traps controlled by people who knew every pipe, every tunnel, every weak point in their own infrastructure. The holographic battle began to play out before the assembled delegates. Zephyrian soldiers in their distinctive black armor advanced toward the settlement, only to disappear into sudden sinkholes as mining charges detonated beneath their feet. Attack formations broke apart as toxic clouds erupted from hidden vents, forcing even armored troops to retreat. But the real shock came when the humans began their counterattack, Veltar continued. They didn't fight like soldiers, fought like the industrial workers they were. Kijan, a maintenance specialist, used his knowledge of the power grid to electrify entire sections of the settlement, turning metal walkways into deadly traps. Miran, who managed the waste processing, weaponized sewage systems to create biological hazards that even Zephyrian environmental suits couldn't handle. Commander Vexera was now visibly distressed, her scales shifting from dark blue to an almost black hue that indicated deep shame among her species. For 6 days, the battle raged, Veltar said, the holograms showing the progression of the conflict. The Zephyrians had superior numbers, better weapons, and air support. But the humans had something else. They had intimate knowledge of their own territory and an absolute refusal to surrender. The display showed human defenders moving through mining tunnels like ghosts, appearing to strike at Zephyrian positions, before vanishing back into the industrial maze. Children as young as 10 were carrying messages through maintenance shafts, while elderly colonists operated improvised weapons from concealed positions. On the 4th day, Zephyrians managed to breach the school where many of the human children were sheltered. Veltar's voice grew heavy with emotion. Hyjin, the teacher, met them at the door. She was armed only with a mining torch and her determination to protect her students. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed the implications. She held them for 37 minutes, Veltar whispered. One human woman against a full assault squad. When reinforcements finally reached the school, they found Hyjin's body surrounded by 7 dead Zephyrian raiders. The children were safe. The holograms showed the aftermath, humans emerging from every corner of the settlement, their faces grim but determined. Instead of breaking at the loss of their teacher, they seemed to fight with even greater ferocity. The dust finally settled after 6 days of impossible resistance. The numbers told a story that defied all military logic, Veltar concluded. 12 humans had died, including Hyjin. The entire Zephyrian raiding force of 5,000 was either dead or in full retreat. The survivors carried tales that spread across every pirate haven in the sector, stories of the Death World demons who turned their own homes into weapons. Commander Vexara finally spoke, her voice barely audible through the translation system. We stopped raiding human colonies after Haven's Rest. The losses were too great. The psychological impact on our warriors was devastating. Veltar nodded grimly. And that was when I first understood the truth about humans. They don't fight like any other species in the galaxy. They don't calculate odds or measure their chances of survival. When something they love is threatened, they become something else entirely. Something that makes even the fiercest predators in the galaxy think twice about challenging them. The holographic display transformed once again, this time showing a world that seemed to breathe with malevolent life. Andoria Prime sprawled before the assembled delegates, a planet where massive trees reached toward twin suns. Their trunks so thick that entire cities could be carved from their heartwood. The jungle canopy stretched endlessly, a green maze, where shadows danced and deadly creatures hunted in perpetual twilight. The Andorian conflict, Veltar said, his voice taking on a different tone, one of professional respect mixed with something approaching. A 3-year war that had already consumed 2 entire battle fleets? The Andorians had fortified themselves in the deep jungle, using the planet's natural defenses to create an impregnable stronghold. The hologram zoomed in to show the fortress. Complex, a massive structure built into and around the ancient trees, with weapon emplacements that could target anything approaching from orbit or ground level. Energy shields shimmered between the branches, creating a dome of protection that had withstood countless bombardments. I was assigned to the Joint Task Force as a tactical observer, Veltar continued. Every major military power in the galaxy had contributed forces, Zephyrian assault troops, Vorthok siege specialists, Klaxon infiltration swarms. We'd spent months planning the assault, calculating casualty projections, designing complex multi-phase operations. The display showed the gathering of military might, dozens of different species warships hanging in orbit, ground forces assembling in staging areas, the careful choreography of a massive military operation. Then the humans arrived with a single transport ship, Veltar said, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. No heavy weapons, no armored vehicles, no orbital support platforms. Just 8 soldiers in standard combat gear, led by Sergeant Jeho. The hologram shifted to show the human squad, 8 figures that seemed almost insignificant compared to the massive alien forces surrounding them. Jeho was a compact man with weathered features and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. His second-in-command, Minho, moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable in any environment. Sujin, the squad's specialist, had the lean build of a runner and the intense focus of a natural predator. The task force commander, General Krextos, briefed them on the situation, Veltar recalled. 2,000 Andorian shock troops, the best the galaxy had to offer. Fortified positions with interlocking fields of fire. Automated defense systems that could track and eliminate anything larger than an insect. The general explained that preliminary bombardment would begin in 72 hours, followed by a massive ground assault. The assembled delegates could imagine the scene, experienced military leaders from across the galaxy planning a traditional siege operation with overwhelming force. Sergeant Jeho listened politely, then asked a single question. What if we just walked in and took it? Veltar's expression showed the same bewilderment he had felt at that moment. General Krextos thought it was a joke. The other commanders laughed. 8 soldiers against 2,000? It was suicide. The hologram showed the human squad preparing for deployment. Unlike the other forces, they carried minimal equipment, standard weapons, basic survival gear, and what appeared to be biological sampling equipment more suited to scientists than soldiers. It requested only one thing, Veltar said. 3 weeks. No orbital strikes, no ground operations, no interference. Just time to assess the situation, as Jeho put it. The display followed the human squad as they disappeared into the alien jungle. Within minutes they had vanished completely, as if the green maze had swallowed them whole. I was assigned to monitor their progress using our most advanced surveillance. Equipment, Veltar continued. For the first week, we lost track of them completely. Our sensors showed nothing. Our communications couldn't establish contact. It was as if 8 humans had simply ceased to exist. The tension in the chamber was palpable as delegates from species known for their own stealth capabilities shifted. Uncomfortably, to disappear so completely from advanced military sensors was nearly impossible. Then the reports began coming in from the Andorian fortress, Veltar said, his voice dropping to create suspense. Strange animal calls in the night, patrol teams reporting unusual wildlife behavior, sentries claiming they heard voices speaking their own language coming from empty air. The hologram showed the Andorian fortress from the inside, reptilian. Soldiers with advanced armor and weapons, moving through corridors carved from living wood. Their scales flickered with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated alertness and growing unease. Sujin had learned to mimic every sound in that jungle, Veltar explained. Not just the calls of native animals, but their hunting patterns, their territorial disputes, even their mating songs. The Andorian guards began using her perfectly replicated bird calls to navigate in the dark, never knowing they were following human-created signals. The display demonstrated this incredible ability Sujin hidden in the canopy, producing sounds so authentic that even the jungle's native creatures responded as if she were one of their own kind. Meanwhile, Minho was mapping every inch of the fortress using nothing but observation and patience, Veltar continued. He learned the guard rotation schedules by watching shadows on the walls. He identified the commanders by studying how other soldiers moved around them. He even figured out the meal schedules by analyzing the timing of waste disposal. The methodical intelligence gathering was unlike anything the alien delegates had ever witnessed. Most species relied on technology for reconnaissance, but the humans were using pure observation and deduction. Jeho coordinated it all with hand signals and brief whispered communications, Veltar said. For 3 weeks, they studied their prey, like ancient hunters planning the perfect kill. They learned not just the fortress's defenses, but the psychology of its defenders. They identified which guards were nervous, which officers were overconfident, which systems were checked regularly, and which were ignored. The hologram showed the fortress from the human perspective, not just a military installation, but a complex ecosystem of personalities, routines, and weaknesses waiting to be exploited. On the 21st day they struck, Veltar said, his voice rising with the excitement of remembered action. But it wasn't like any military assault we had ever witnessed. It was more like watching a pack of ancient predators coordinate a hunt. The display exploded into activity. 12 different points around the fortress erupted in simultaneous chaos, communication arrays going down, power systems failing, guard posts falling silent. But there were no explosions, no massive weapons fire, no obvious signs of attack. They hit the fortress's nervous system first, Veltar explained. Sujin disabled the communication relays by mimicking maintenance signals that caused the automated systems to shut down for routine repairs. Minho used his knowledge of the guard schedules to eliminate sentries during shift changes when no one would miss them for hours. The coordinated assault was a masterpiece of timing and precision. Each action triggered cascading failures throughout the fortress's defense network. The Andorian commanders found themselves isolated in their own stronghold, Veltar continued. Their communications were down, their sensors were showing false readings, and their troops were reporting contradictory information from all directions. Panic spread faster than plasma fire. Ain't the hologram showed Andorian soldiers running through? Corridors no longer sure who they could trust or where the enemy might be. The fortress that had seemed impregnable was now a trap, with its own defenses turned against the defenders. In 4 hours it was over, Veltar concluded. 2,000 elite Andorian shock troops surrendered to 8 humans they never actually saw. The only casualty was Sergeant Jeho, who cut his hand on broken glass while securing the command center. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 8 humans had accomplished what entire fleets could not, using nothing but patience, observation, and an understanding of their enemy that went beyond simple military intelligence. That day, I learned that humans don't just fight wars, Veltar said quietly. They hunt them. The holographic display transformed into something that made several delegates instinctively recoil. New soul appeared before them in all its former glory, a magnificent human metropolis that stretched across rolling hills beneath twin moons. Crystalline towers reached toward the stars, their surfaces reflecting the light of the system's orange sun. Parks and gardens wove between residential districts where millions of humans had lived, worked, and raised their families. Was humanity's crown jewel in the outer territories, Veltar began, his voice carrying the weight of tragedy. Population, 4.7 million souls. It was a city of artists and engineers, teachers and dreamers. Children played in floating gardens that defied gravity. Elderly couples walked hand in hand through market districts that sold goods from 100 different worlds. The hologram showed the city's daily life, humans of all ages moving through gleaming streets, hovercars gliding between buildings, the gentle hum of a civilization at peace. It was beautiful in a way that transcended species barriers. Then the hegemony arrived, Veltar continued, and the display shifted to show the Dark Fleet materializing from hyperspace. The Dominion Council had decided that humanity was expanding, too quickly, becoming too influential. New Sol would serve as an example, a demonstration of what happened to species that grew beyond their assigned boundaries. The hegemony fleet was massive, hundreds of warships arranged in perfect battle formation. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, carrier vessels disgorging clouds of fighters, bombardment platforms that could crack a planet's crust. 50,000 elite troops prepared for what they assumed would be a quick, decisive victory. General Kane of the hegemony sent the surrender demand personally, Veltar said. Evacuate the city within 48 hours or face total annihilation. Standard protocol: demonstrate overwhelming force, demand submission, crush any resistance. The hologram showed the human response. Instead of panic or preparation for evacuation, something else was happening in New Sol. People were moving with purpose, but not toward escape routes. They were digging in. General Wu Jin was the human military commander, a woman of 67 years who had served in the Colonial Defense Forces for 4 decades. Her second in Candor, Commander the Jin, was barely 30, a tactical genius who had studied every major battle in galactic history. Together, they made a decision that defied all military logic. The display showed the 2 women standing in the city's command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching enemy fleet. Instead of retreat plans, they were reviewing something else entirely: infrastructure maps, industrial facilities, population distribution charts. They could have evacuated, Veltar emphasized. The hegemony had given them time. Transport ships were already en route from other human colonies. 4 million civilians could have been saved. Instead, General Wu Jin activated something called the Death World Doctrine. The transformation that followed was unlike anything the assembled delegates had ever witnessed. The beautiful city began to change, as if a switch had been flipped in the collective human consciousness. They turned their own paradise into a weapon, Veltar said, his voice filled with a mixture of horror and awe. Industrial plants that had produced consumer goods were converted to manufacture poison gas. Water treatment facilities that had provided clean drinking water for millions began pumping toxic chemicals into the supply system. Even the beautiful floating gardens were rigged with explosives. The hologram showed the systematic destruction of everything that made New Sol beautiful. Humans worked with mechanical precision, destroying their own infrastructure with the same care they had used to build it. I was aboard a hegemony observation vessel, signed to document the conquest for the Galactic Archives, Veltar continued. When the first wave of troops landed, they expected to find a demoralized population ready to surrender. Instead, they found something that still haunts my dreams. The display showed hegemony soldiers in their distinctive silver armor moving through what had once been a residential district. The buildings were intact, but something was wrong. The streets were too quiet, too empty. Windows stared down like dead eyes. Young Su was 8 years old, Veltar said quietly. He had been a normal child, played with toys, attended school, probably complained about doing his homework. When the first hegemony patrol entered his neighborhood, he was waiting. For them, the hologram showed a small human child standing in the middle of an empty street, apparently lost and frightened. The hegemony soldiers, following their protocols for civilian encounters, approached to provide assistance. He led them straight into a kill zone. Veltar continued. The entire city block had been rigged to collapse. 23 soldiers died. In the first few seconds, Sfu was found in the rubble later, clutching a detonator and a photograph of his family. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. A child, a being that most species would instinctively protect, had been turned into a weapon of war. But that was just the beginning, Veltar said, his mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. Every street corner became a battlefield. Every building was a potential trap. The humans had rigged their own homes with explosives, poisoned their own food supplies, turned their schools and hospitals into fortress positions. The hologram showed the urban warfare that followed, unlike anything in galactic military history. Humans fought from the ruins of their own civilization, using debris and rubble as weapons. A grandmother named Malsoon, her leg broken and trapped under concrete, continued to operate a sniper rifle from her position for 6 hours before enemy forces finally located her. They fought with anything they could find, Veltar continued. Broken glass became shrapnel. Pieces of metal from destroyed vehicles became spears. An injured man named Kyun Ho, both arms clearly broken, picked up chunks of concrete with his teeth and threw them at enemy positions. The display showed the psychological impact on the hegemony forces. Elite soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves facing an enemy that defied all understanding. These weren't professional military forces following established tactics. These were desperate people defending their homes with an intensity that bordered on madness. Commander the Jinn coordinated the defense from a bunker beneath the city's ruins, Veltar said. She had turned the entire metropolitan area into a single massive weapon. Every sewer tunnel was rigged with explosives. Every subway station became a command post. The beautiful parks where children had played were now sniper nests and mortar positions. The hologram showed the commander a young woman covered in concrete dust and blood, her uniform torn but her eyes still burning with determination. Around her, other humans worked with mechanical precision, turning their knowledge of the city's infrastructure into tactical advantages. The hegemony forces had superior numbers, better weapons, and complete air superiority, Veltar continued. But they were fighting an enemy that used the city itself as a weapon. Buildings collapsed when they entered. Streets exploded beneath their feet. Even the air they breathed was poisoned. The display showed the gradual breakdown of hegemony. Morale. Soldiers who had fought across the galaxy began to refuse orders. Medical personnel reported increasing cases of psychological trauma. The clean, efficient conquest had become a nightmare of urban warfare where every shadow might hide death. After 2 weeks of fighting, something unprecedented happened, Veltar said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The hegemony forces withdrew, not because they were defeated militarily, but because they could no longer psychologically handle what they were facing. The hologram showed the final scenes, hegemony troops evacuating their positions, their commanders calling for immediate withdrawal. The invasion fleet that had arrived with such confidence was retreating in disorder. General Kane's final report to the Dominion Council contained a single sentence that changed galactic policy toward humanity forever, Veltar concluded. We cannot conquer a species that loves their freedom more than their lives. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. The humans had won not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through an absolute refusal to accept defeat, even at the cost of everything they held dear. That day, I learned the most terrifying truth about humanity, Veltar said quietly. They would rather die free than live as slaves, and they will take anyone who tries to enslave them straight to hell with them. Commander Veltar straightened. To his full height, his battle-scarred armor catching the chamber's harsh lighting like a monument to countless conflicts. The assembled delegates had sat in stunned silence through his revelations. But now he could see the fear creeping into their alien features, the color changes in Vorthok's skin, the rapid clicking of clacks in mandibles, the nervous energy discharges from the ethereal containment suits. I share these tales not to frighten you, but to prepare you, Veltar announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the impossible. Because what I've shown you, the mining colony, the jungle fortress, the urban battlefield, these were merely glimpses of human capability. Now we face something that will test not just humanity, but every living being in this galaxy. The holographic display behind him shifted, showing deep space sensor readings that made several delegates lean forward in alarm. Massive signatures moved in perfect geometric formation through the void between stars, their shapes alien even by galactic standards. The ships were enormous, each one larger than most space stations, their surfaces covered in what appeared to be organic growth, patterns that pulsed with malevolent energy. "The Void Armada," Veltar said, letting the words hang in the air like a death sentence. Long-range scouts first detected them 18 cycles ago, moving through the Outer Rim territories. Since then, they have systematically consumed 17. Civilizations not conquered, consumed. They leave nothing behind but empty worlds and silence. The display showed the Armada's path of destruction. Entire star systems reduced to lifeless husks. Planets stripped of all organic matter, civilizations that had existed for millennia erased as if they had never been. The scale of destruction was beyond anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. They did not negotiate, Veltar continued. They did not demand surrender. They simply arrive, analyze the local military capabilities, adapt their tactics accordingly, and then systematically eliminate all resistance. The Corvani Empire held them off for 3 months with their legendary shield technology. The Zarthic Collective lasted 6 weeks, despite their quantum warfare capabilities. The ancient philosopher kings of Zarian fell in 11 days. General Mordok of the Corvani delegation stood abruptly, his crystalline form resonating with harmonic distress. "Commander, you cannot possibly suggest that humans, a species barely 2 centuries into space travel, could succeed where we failed." Velta's scarred features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. "General, that is exactly what I am suggesting, because the Void Armada has never encountered anything like humanity. They have perfected their tactics against logical opponents who fight rational wars for understandable objectives. But humans, ... The hologram shifted to show recent communications intercepts from human space. Dozens of ships were moving toward the projected intercept point with the Void Armada, not fleeing from the threat, but moving toward it. The vessels ranged from massive military dreadnoughts to converted civilian transports, all broadcasting the same message on open channels. Captain Inho of the human destroyer Dauntless transmitted this message to all vessels in his fleet yesterday, Veltar said, activating the audio system. The chamber filled with a human voice speaking words that had been translated into dozens of languages. "We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because some things are worth dying for. Today we stand not just for humanity, but for every species that calls this galaxy home. Let them come," the simple declaration sent ripples of emotion through the assembled delegates. Here was a species volunteering to face an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than their own. Not because they had been ordered to, but because they chose to. "But surely they must have some strategic advantage," protested Admiral Zixara of the Aquatic Collective, her biosuit bubbling with agitation. "Advanced weapons, new technology, superior numbers." Veltar activated another display showing the human fleet composition. 47 ships against a force that numbers in the thousands. Their weapons are standard plasma and kinetic systems. Effective, but nothing revolutionary. Their armor is reliable, but not exceptional. By every conventional military analysis, they are hopelessly outmatched. The silence that followed was deafening. If humans had no technological advantage, if they were outnumbered beyond reason, why were they advancing towards certain destruction? "Because you still don't understand what makes humans dangerous," Veltar said quietly. "It's not their weapons or their ships or their tactics. It's what they fight for. Let me tell you what happened at the Battle of Kepler Station when human Commander Biora faced a similar choice." The hologram showed a space station under siege. Its hull breached in multiple places, emergency lights casting eerie shadows through smoke-filled corridors. Thousands of Centaurian refugees, tall, graceful beings with silver skin and large eyes, huddled in the station's interior while enemy forces closed in. "Biora had 30 human marines against 300 attackers," Veltar continued. "The evacuation ships needed 20 more minutes to dock and load the refugees. Standard military doctrine called for strategic withdrawal, save the soldiers. For future battles, accept the loss of the civilians." The display showed Commander Biora, a compact woman with graying hair and determined eyes, making her decision. Instead of ordering a retreat, she sealed herself and her marines in the breached section of the station. She transmitted a final message to the evacuation fleet. "We hold the line here. Get those families to safety. Tell them humans keep their promises." Veltar's voice carried the weight of witness sacrifice. For 23 minutes 30, humans held off overwhelming odds in the vacuum of space, fighting in damaged armor with failing life support systems. The hologram showed the desperate battle, humans moving through airless corridors, using debris and improvised weapons, buying time with their lives. When the evacuation ships finally departed, they carried 4,000 Centaurian refugees. To safety? Not one human marine survived, Veltar said simply.
Oh.
But every single refugee lived to see their new home. That day, the Centaurian Assembly passed a resolution declaring humans brothers of the Starpath, the highest honor they can bestow. Similar stories followed. Hyun Woo, a human engineer who had given his life shielding a Calarian nursery from orbital bombardment, singing lullabies to alien children as enemy fire rained down around them. The crew of the human transport Morning Star, who had refused evacuation orders to rescue survivors from a plague-stricken research station, knowing they would likely die from exposure to the alien disease. Do you begin to see the pattern? Veltar asked the increasingly subdued assembly. Humans don't just wage war, they wage hope. They fight not for conquest or resources or territory. They fight for the right of others to exist, to be free, to have a future worth living. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing the current positions of both the Void Armada and the approaching human fleet. The numbers were staggering, thousands of enemy vessels against fewer than 50 human ships. The Void Armada has spent millennia perfecting their approach, Veltar said. They analyze enemy capabilities, identify weaknesses, adapt their tactics to exploit those weaknesses, then systematically dismantle all resistance. It has never failed them. He paused, letting his next words carry full weight. But they have never analyzed hope. They have never calculated the tactical value of sacrifice. They have never encountered an enemy that becomes more dangerous the more desperate the situation becomes. The Void Armada understands conquest, but they have never faced an opponent that views surrender as impossible and views protecting others as the highest honor. General Krextos of the Unified Defense Forces stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. "Commander, what are you suggesting we do? Our combined fleets are already moving to intercept positions. Should we coordinate with the human forces?" Veltar's mandibles clicked in what his species used as confident affirmation. "General, the humans have already sent us their coordination frequencies and tactical plans. But they're not asking us to fight alongside them. They're asking us to stay back and protect the civilian evacuation routes." A wave of confused murmurs swept through the assembly. The humans were volunteering to face the enemy alone, while asking other species to focus on saving non-combatants. Captain Sungman of the human battlecruiser Indomitable sent this message to our fleet commanders 6 hours ago, Veltar said, activating another audio transmission. "We know what we're facing. We know the odds. But someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Today, that someone is us. Keep the evacuation corridors open. Protect the civilians. Let us do what humans do best." The chamber erupted in heated discussions as delegates from different species debated the implications. Some argued for combining forces. Others questioned whether the human sacrifice would achieve anything meaningful. But Veltar raised his hand for silence. "There is something else you need to understand," he said quietly. "The Void Armada has never encountered failure. For millennia, their systematic approach has never been defeated. They have no contingency plans for facing an enemy that refuses to be analyzed, categorized, and defeated, according to their established patterns." The hologram showed tactical projections, complex mathematical models that the Void Armada used to predict and counter enemy responses. Every curve and calculation was based on rational decision-making, logical resource allocation, and predictable behavior patterns. But humans are not predictable, Veltar continued. When cornered, they don't calculate odds, they fight harder. When facing impossible situations, they don't retreat, they find impossible solutions. When protecting others, They don't consider personal costs. They consider only what needs to be done. He gestured to the tactical displays surrounding the SE chamber, showing the positions of ships from dozens of species all moving toward defensive positions around civilian evacuation routes. Look around you, Veltar said. Representatives from 12 major civilizations all united in a common cause. Do you know what achieved this unprecedented cooperation? Not threats or bargaining or political maneuvering. It was the simple human declaration that some things are worth dying for. Admiral Zixara spoke again, her voice carrying new understanding. You believe the humans can actually defeat the Void Armada? Veltar was quiet for a long moment before answering, I believe the humans will do what they always do when faced with impossible odds and people they love are threatened. They will find a way to win, or they will make victory so costly that their enemies will remember the price forever. The commander moved to the chamber's central podium, his scarred armor reflecting the light from dozens of different worlds represented in the assembly. The Void Armada believes they understand warfare because they have mastered the science of destruction, he said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. But they have never faced the art of protection. They have never encountered warriors who fight not because they hate what is in front of them, but because they love what is behind them. As if summoned by his words, new communications began flooding the chamber's displays. Messages from human ships throughout the galaxy, not just military vessels, but civilian transports, research ships, even private cargo haulers, all broadcasting the same simple declaration, we stand ready. The galaxy is about to witness something unprecedented, Veltar concluded, his voice rising with emotion. Not the destruction of humanity, but the awakening of something that has slept in the hearts of all civilized species. The willingness to stand together against darkness, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to declare that some things are worth any sacrifice. He saluted the assembly with the sharp crack of his armored fist against his chest, a gesture that was immediately returned by every delegate in the chamber, regardless of species or previous allegiances. The humans are coming, Veltar said simply. Not as conquerors or saviors, but as friends. And the Void Armada is about to learn why. Throughout the galaxy, when people tell stories of courage and hope, they tell stories about humans. As the chamber lights dimmed and the delegates filed out to coordinate the greatest defensive effort in galactic history, each carried with them a new understanding. The greatest weapon in the universe was not technology or numbers or superior firepower. It was the unbreakable spirit of beings who refused to let darkness win, who chose to stand together against impossible odds, who believed that love was stronger than fear. The galaxy would soon witness the truth that Commander Veltar had learned through blood and sacrifice. Humans were feared across the stars, not for their capacity for destruction, but for their infinite capacity for hope. And in the vast darkness between the stars, 47 human ships moved steadily toward an enemy that had never tasted defeat, carrying with them the prayers and hopes of 1,000 worlds, ready to prove that sometimes the impossible was simply another word for what humans did on any given day. The end.